Video Network.
So, if you want to make that meaningful, every person, if you wanted to collect all that material, every person in the world could walk away with 15 buckets of Mount St. Helens. Or it would all fit on one football field if you built walls around it 600 miles high. Or you could bury the city of Washington, D.C. to a depth of 14 feet. Or, that still doesn't mean anything to you. Everyone put your fingers up, even with each slope of Mount St. Helens, and make your fingertips meet together. Where your fingertips meet together is where the top of Mount St. Helens used to be. Now, as you do that, imagine that 90% of what's missing, 90%, fell off Mount St. Helens during this landslide. Everyone thinks the mountain blew itself apart. Mount St. Helens fell apart. Gravity, it's a really powerful force. But if you think about it, the flank of the mountain was pushed sideways 5 feet a day for 2 months. And eventually the north flank became too steep, it fell off. That took the summit down right behind it, along with all the material inside the crater there today that was inside the crater. So we saw steam is what powered the blast. Well, you remember I said there was a lot of groundwater in Mount St. Helens because there was all that snow and ice on it. Well, that groundwater carried huge intact blocks of Mount St. Helens, incredible distances down off the volcano. So everyone scoot forward here a little bit so you can see these things. Look down at the lower left-hand side of the valley, and can you see all the mounds of earth over there? Again, there's lots of little gray mounds and black mounds laying down here in the valley bottom. The mounds of earth are called a hummock. But what a hummock really is an intact chunk of Mount St. Helens. Each one of those is a gigantic piece of the volcano that was carried down off the mountain in kind of a slurry of groundwater. The groundwater acted like a lubricant which carried these big pieces down off the mountain. And the landslide did some really cool stuff. Can everyone see Spirit Lake, the body of water over there at the far end of the valley? Can everyone see that? Yeah. Okay, part of the landslide actually smashed into Spirit Lake. When it hit Spirit Lake, it would be a lot like inviting a sumo wrestler to your home and having him leap into your bathtub. Landslide comes crashing down off Mount St. Helens and smashes into Spirit Lake. So, this is roughly the outline of Spirit Lake prior to the eruption. So as the landslide came down off the mountain, it surged right through both lobes of Spirit Lake. That created a huge wave of water that slashed 800 feet up the hillsides in the opposite end of the lake. And within seconds, that water came back down and landed on the landslide deposit, landed on those hummocks. And that hummock layer was about 150 feet deep. And that instantly doubled the size of Spirit Lake. And that's because the lake bottom is so much higher, it pushed the water up and over a larger surface area, making it twice as large, but half as deep as it used to be. And this is the reason why you can see Spirit Lake from Johnston Ridge today. You would not have been able to see it from here prior to the eruption because you can see the lake was actually much, much smaller than it is today. Now that's pretty impressive, but most of the slide didn't go into Spirit Lake. Most of it slammed into Johnston Ridge, which is the long ridge we're standing on right here. Water and gas. Those are the driving forces behind volcanic eruptions. It was all that water, the groundwater that initially was getting heated and was flashing to steam, causing the explosions to blast out the side of the top of the volcano. It was all that superheated water inside that molten rock that again flashed to steam and blasted out the north face of the mountain, flattening the forest. And of course, it was the groundwater inside the volcano which carried those huge intact blocks 14 miles down valley. So water and gas, those are the driving forces behind volcanic eruptions. And I'd like to thank you all very much for coming today. You're really the driving force behind me being here doing this presentation and this visitor center being open. 5 years ago, Congress told us to implement this fee system, and 5 years ago, our budget was $3.2 million. This past year, we were allocated $400,000 in taxpayer funds. You really are the driving force because the money you spend on these passes stays right here to directly support services at the monument. Thank you very, very much for supporting your national monument, and have a great visit at Mount St. Helens today. Thank you.
So we were talking to Todd Collins. Collins, yes. The visitor center here, and I have a quick question about how far are we from the actual lava, the mound itself, and the
5.5 miles from the center of the crater from right here at Johnston Ridge.
from right here, and does that put us about 4.5 from the base?
Probably in the neighborhood of that.
Okay. All right. Any questions?
Yeah. How long have you been involved in the center here?
I've worked at Mount St. Helens since 1986 as a temporary employee. Just recently became a permanent employee here, so I'm the assistant director here at the center.
Oh, wow.
And I've been involved with Johnston Ridge really since the very beginning planning stages of it. I was the writer of the interpretive plan and worked on the exhibit design for this building and the Coldwater Ridge Visitor Center just down the road from here.
So when was this visitor center put in?
It was opened to the public on May 18th, 1997.
Oh, for one of the anniversaries.
Yes, yeah. Each visitor center has been, it's an anniversary opening.
Oh, really?
The Coldwater Ridge Center opened on May 18th, 1993, and I believe, with the exception of the Mount St. Helens Visitor Center, that opened right before Christmas of '86. Yeah. Huh.
I didn't know that. So you've actually written some of the interpretive programs. I heard there's an actual walk through the blast zone. We were just hearing about that.
Yeah, we do guided walks out of the visitor center here and down one of the boundary trail, which is one of the trails that just goes down from the visitor center from here. There's about 45-minute long walks. And then we offer a longer guided walk during the summertime down in an area known as the hummocks, which is down the valley floor. Actually, this picture right behind us here is the hummocks.
Yeah.
And that's where that guided hike will be going on down there today.
What other kinds of things would you expect to see on the walk? Are there kind of artifacts and?
That particular walk, well, a hummock is a big chunk or piece of Mount St. Helens that fell off the volcano during a landslide. So each one of the mounds in that picture there is a big piece of the mountain, and in between all the mounds are these beautiful little wetlands where water's collected.
Really?
So you would down there you could see all kinds of waterfowl, lots of frogs, toads, and salamanders at this time of the year. We could almost have Toto crossing signs up because there's so many of them out migrating right now.
So you could expect to see different kinds of wildlife who've taken to the change in the landscape there.
Could probably also have a good chance of seeing elk, or at least elk browse or sign of them, tracks.
During the drive up here, I've noticed the different changes in with the effects of the mountain itself. Is there a particular reason why this section here hasn't quite recovered as fast as the others?
Yeah, well, as you drove up the road today, you entered the blast zone 15 miles back down the road from here when you crossed the very large Hofstad Bluff Bridge. The blast zone is a 150,000 acre area, fan-shaped area in front of the mountain. Weyerhaeuser Timber Corporation owns 68,000 acres of the blast zone. And when you first entered the blast zone today, you were driving through Weyerhaeuser land until you got to Elk Rock Viewpoint. And
we passed.
then you probably noticed one side of the road, lots of little green trees and rows.
Yeah.
And the other side of the road
is
very different.
Bare.
Right.
Yeah.
The monument was established for research, recreation, and education, and it's just basically being left to set aside to let natural processes occur at their own pace.
Yeah.
And that's why there's a big difference in vegetation types as you come up the road.
Very big difference. Yeah, as you see trees and grass and everything growing back. In some places you can't tell anything had happened, and in others you get up to the mountain here and it's very bare. I actually didn't expect to see it that way right at the base of the mountain. That was interesting.
And also, once you're in the monument, the landscape was changed in a lot of different ways. There were different stages or events during the May 18th, 1980 eruption. There was this landslide, there was a lateral explosion, there was mud flows, very hot rock avalanches, and this big ash plume that went up in the air. Each one of those events changed the landscape in a different way. And thus the rates of recovery are very different in each area.
Oh, okay. Like, that makes sense.
When you're down in the hummocks area, the landslide area, the recovery is well on its way because in between all those dips, remember I said there's these little wetlands that have formed. There's actually 120 ponds and lakes which formed due to the landslide. And where you have water, you have life. So that's one of the areas which has changed very quickly. In the areas with the blown down forest,
south-facing exposures where you're facing the mountain, there tended to be very few survivors on that.
Yeah.
But northern-facing exposures, where there was snow on the ground when the mountain blew up, the snow acted like insulation and protected lots of small trees and plants. For example, if you were to walk down the eruption trail from here back down to the parking lot, as you cross over the top of the hill, you'll notice a huge change in vegetation. There's things that survived on the leeward side versus nothing that survived on the side facing the mountain. And down below us here is one of the only places where nothing survived.
Right, because there's actually little, if any, water right down here.
Yeah,
at least nothing that's very visible.
Nothing that's very visible, but right now it's very dry. If you were to come back here in another 2 weeks or so, when we start getting our fall rains, that whole pumice plain down below us is a very vibrant green. There's a moss covering almost the whole ground surface area down there. It's just that it's in a state of dormancy right now, and as soon as we get a rainfall,
and
it really greens up. But even down there in an area that was most severely impacted by the eruption, things have come back very, very quickly down there. There's a herd of elk that live down there in the summer, between 30 to 50 elk. There's a research plot down there where one scientist found the first plant to colonize the area, set up a research plot around it, and has hand counted the life and death of over 250,000 plants inside his plot. So even down there, things have moved back in.
Yeah. We were talking on the way up. I'm too young to remember.
As it is as well. I was first came here in 1986. But Mount St. Helens, just with its perfect cone-shaped mountain, it was considered the Mount Fuji of the West. It was a very, very beautiful mountain, and that smooth shape like that is an indication of a very young volcano.
Yeah.
When it's perfectly symmetrical like that, it tells you that it's young, and just because the glaciers haven't had time to carve up and tear apart the mountain. Like if you look at Mount Adams or Mount Rainier.
Oh, right. They're very rough.
Very rough and rugged, where Mount St. Helens was very smooth and symmetrical. And if you compare them in age, geologists believe Mount St. Helens is about 40,000 years old.
Which is not a lot.
Not a lot for geology.
In geology,
which makes it like about a teenager, whereas Mount Adams is about 500,000 years old.
Wow.
And because it's older, it doesn't erupt as frequently.
It's a lot older. I want to thank you for your time.
Certainly.
And we'll continue on with our tour of the place here. And